All right. Howdy, folks. It's Jen S and Jennifer S with you today. So we've got some similar acronyms, y'all. We are here for another weekly episode of this new series that I've got going, which is my Coaching Misunderstood with a Guest, which I'm sure you figured because I'm not here by myself. So by the time you are watching this, the episode on this topic I would have done by myself. That already came out on Tuesday. So if you do want to watch like a 5-minute solo and you haven't seen it, that's there. But today, Jennifer, do you prefer to go by Jennifer in this conversation or Jen?
Jennifer is perfect.
Okay, we'll go by what your Zoom name says. So y'all, this is my colleague, Jennifer Schmidt with me. She is another professional coach in the field who was willing to say yes to this conversation without much laid down around it. So thank you for that.
Of course.
And so y'all, I'll give Jen a nice intro here in a minute, but what we're doing is we are just two coaches who are getting together to take the theme, because coaching is a tool to support us with, I think, really starting to kind of tell the difference between when we're discerning and when we're judging, and how to get more out of the judgment area, because it just doesn't feel good for anybody, and to get more into the space of discernment. And so this conversation is not scripted. She and I don't know how this is going to go. And it's on purpose because, we're here to really shed light on the field of coaching. And in the field, in coaching, we don't bring agenda. We co-create. We kind of have a theme and we dance in the moment with that theme. And it goes how it goes. And so that's what we're going to be doing here today. And if you saw last week's episode, you probably saw Carrie and I went down like 10 different rabbit holes. We could make like a brand new series around this. And so I'm just going to read to all of you who this lovely being is that we have with us. And Jennifer, who also goes by Zenjen, Zenjen Love, and the ways you can reach her are going to be in the verbiage of whatever platform you're watching this on. But Jennifer has always been an intuitive wild rebel, wanting to break free from all limitations that came before her. Throughout the years, she learned to mask who she truly was and found herself never wanting to shine too brightly. This inevitably caused depression, anxiety, and addictions throughout her teenage years and early adulthood. As the years progressed, she had a fire inside of herself to discover why she was experiencing these things and how to overcome them. It led her to a degree in psychology and a passion for holistic health and wellness. Ontological life coaching soon became another perfect fit into her journey and has led her on a deep spiritual journey, discovering how she can live her purpose here on earth. She has lived a life devoted towards paving a clear path and healing, transformation, and soul evolution for those that she works with. The work is all inclusive, incorporating spiritual, physical, mental, and emotional practices that allow herself and others to live as they were intended, wild and free. And I love that because it reminds me actually of the oracle card I drew today.
Yes.
And it says pedestal. And if you all can notice, she's bound, but none of the bindings are tied. So she's not actually bound. Wow. She has the illusion that she's bound. And so is she going to free herself of these or not? Maybe that'll be another Coaching Misunderstood episode.
I love that. I'm not too familiar with the tarot, but that image looked pretty spot on.
Really pretty, right? Y'all, once again, I was joking with Jennifer. I've got this ring light. I used to say the spirits are being moved when we record. I'm coming to terms with what you've probably all known along this whole time. It just doesn't work. So I have to get a new one in process. Okay. I'm finally caught up with you. So I digress.
It's fun to play with the spirits and
It is,
have
right?
things to them, and
Well,
yeah,
because sometimes they do show up like that way, right? And so,
totally.
and it was always during like my like moon events and stuff like that. Now I'm like, well, it's increasing at all events, so I'm inclined to think there's a short in it. So everyone else is probably like, yeah, we've thought this for a while, Jen. Hate to break it to you.
I love it so much.
So, Jen, let me just give you context, and everyone else. So this idea for this episode came to me um, recently, but it was something I started thinking about probably, I'm looking at my calendar, probably this time last year, or maybe a little bit later on. And it was really when, we we experienced this global pandemic. The political atmosphere went crazy, just so much division. And I noticed for me it was an invitation into shadow work, inner child work, and it was a very, very polarizing, judgmental place for me to be. It did not feel good, and it was where I was.
Mhm.
So, I didn't try to hide it. I backed up, took a little space from being with people so much, because I never want to serve if I'm not in the space to. And I really did my own work. And I started really thinking about the topic of discernment and judgment, and how they can feel similar, how they are similar, but how they're also different.
Mhm.
And so it's been something I've thought about for a while, but haven't really done anything with. So I'm excited to get to have this conversation with you.
Me too.
And so you and I were actually on the phone when I mentioned it, and then I sent you an email out. And so what I like to start with, just with every guest that I've done this with so far, and I think we're only the fourth ones doing this, but when I pitched it to you, or when you read the subject or the topic, did anything immediately come up for you? Like anything where you're like, oh, and no worries if it didn't. I'm just curious. Okay, sounds like something did.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
What came up for you?
So much came up like right away. I could feel the importance of this
Mm,
distinction in my own life.
mm,
And so much, especially similar to you in this past year, how discernment has been a key piece in navigating my inner work, my shadow work, my spirituality, and knowing what is best for me and what am I using just as a protection, just as that survival mechanism to keep me out of growth or that next level of
yeah,
business and development. This is, I think they should teach this in schools, honestly.
right?
Honestly. Yeah, it just feels like a very key piece to my journey with taking things to the extreme. I'm not a person that just goes step by step. I move to different places by myself across the country, onto an island. Like I'm taking these big leaps of faith, and it's like, okay, I need to discern, like, is this what's best for me? Or is this me judging where I'm at right now and not enjoying what I have in the present moment? Therefore, I'm just looking to escape. That's kind of what came up for me right away. And
I'm jotting
since,
this down. I love it. Yeah.
since
Yeah. So I love that. So discernment is more of a space where it sounds like where you're in more like curious inquiry. Like, is this truly what's best for me? But you're wanting to know, or am I in a space of judgment?
Mhm.
Is there a way for yourself? We're just kind of riff off this till we riff off something else. But for you, I'm curious, because I love that distinction. Because when we're asking what's best, it's very different than judging where we are. How can you tell the difference when you're in discernment or when you're in judgment? Is there any tells for you?
Great question. Definitely. Discernment is a very solid inner knowing.
Mm,
I see it like energetically, I see it as just like a pillar
Mm,
going through the center of my body.
mhm.
It's this inner knowing, like, yes, like this feels right. And there might be maybe some lingering judgments about the discernment that I've come to, but I can feel that it's just a solid inner knowing and it feels good. It feels spacious.
Yeah.
Judgment, on the other hand, there's always an emotional charge.
Mm. I love that. I love that.
Whether it's like a feeling in my heart or like a block in my throat, there's always something that's slightly triggering to me that I can feel, whether it's in my tone of voice or my reaction or response to something. Um, yeah, there's always just a little bit of wobbliness in the judgment. And it's like, there's something deeper going on here.
Yeah, I personally love what you just shared because I would say that's how I experience it too. Like the discernment, it's where you're on solid ground, right? Or you've got that solid pillar running up through you to hold you up, and there's space so you don't feel constricted. And I love with the judgment that you brought in the emotional piece. Because I think very often, and y'all, we're not here to label emotions or feelings as good or bad. You know, they are what they are. They're necessary. They give us information. But to Jennifer's point, um, it's something to be curious about. I think when we are met with a lot of feelings or a lot of emotions, I think it's something to be curious about. And as I'm thinking back to where I was, last year when I was really noticing that, um, I knew I was in the judgment because I was mad about it, right?
Yeah.
Like I am witnessing things that you like, and let's just even hear the language, right? Like the division that you people are doing, and I don't agree with it, and therefore I'm going to get mad about it. Where normally, if you're not like in judgment, you're like, you don't care. You might be like, well, I'm certainly not in agreement with you. I'm not going to go out and do it, but I really don't care what you're doing, right? Like I had an opinion. I was like, I am right about all this.
Yep.
Sad thing was, I've done enough work to know I wasn't. And I was like, oh, this is really painful. I'm in a very, very icky righteous spot right now.
What a fun time to have like millions of other people doing the same exact thing.
I know, right? And then it's like, is it mine? Is it yours? What's happening? Damn it.
Great.
Discernment, right? Having to discern, is it mine or is it yours? But I love that. So yeah, like we're kind of starting off and almost with giving you some definitions, right? Because if you're coming into watching this interview where you're like, well, I don't even know about this whole tool thing because I don't even know the difference between the two. We're starting to hear that discerning is more, is this best for me? Is this maybe best for the greater good? Is it in alignment? It might be more curious. Um, you're on solid ground, you're spacious. Where when you're in judgment, there's emotion. Based off what I shared, there might be some righteousness. There might be some, oh, and because I'm judging you for that, that means all these other things too, right? It could open up more judgment. So we're starting to kind of paint the difference. And so if we're talking about this lovely thing that you and I both get to do, which is coaching, and coaching is a tool to support us in getting more into judgment, more into discernment versus judgment. Why is it important? Why do we feel that's important? And I think people can kind of probably read between the lines a little bit based off what we shared a little bit. But if we were to just go out and spell it out, why does that feel important to you?
Yeah, especially like who I am as a coach and why my clients hire me is to get to a new level, to expand into something that they've never been before.
Hmm.
That process isn't always easy, because what we're doing is cracking the shell. We're cracking the shells of our survival mechanisms, of those protections that are keeping us smaller than intended, and maybe without our awareness most of the time. So this piece of discerning versus judging, not only will it help you get to that new level of growth and leadership that you're looking to bring about, but it deepens your relationships within yourself and with others. Recently, I had an awesome breakthrough with one of my clients she was observing and intentionally separating herself from her fiance's anger because it was deeply triggering,
Yeah.
deeply triggering. And there were all these judgments coming about, and they weren't necessarily bad judgments. And we were entitled to our own opinions and our observations and whatever, but it was actually keeping her stuck.
Yeah, right.
And there was a lot of gold in those judgments that she couldn't necessarily see. They were blind spots. Normally, we just go about our days and have judgments here and there, not knowing that this is actually the universe shining something to us.
Yeah.
To take a deeper look at. And usually behind the judgments are insecurities or fears or things that are wanting to be seen, to be released.
I love that. So you all, why this is important and why we are talking about the fact that coaching is a tool, because that's really what coaching is. It provides you with an arsenal of tools in your toolkit. And it's a lot of the tools that we never got when we were young or in school, right? Like, to your point earlier, they should teach this, but it helps you get to new levels, to expand, to deepen. And what you said that stuck out the most to me was that judgment keeps us stuck. And I think why that stands out for me is you all, I would say before I went through coaching and those different modalities, to help expand my mind, to be challenged, right? To be challenged by people. If you're hanging around with all people who always think like you, are they challenging any of the judgment? No, we feel safe in it together. And so what I found for myself was that my judgments were really keeping me stuck as well. And they will do that because when we are right about something, we're fixed, right? There's not going to be any curiosity. And it reminds me, Jennifer, of because Jennifer and I went through the same coaching leadership training, if I didn't already share that. And the way they started is, they're basically like, when we're introing ourselves, they just basically say, all right, everyone, just write down all your judgments and assertions about this human. And I'm like, whoa, what? And then where they went after that was, y'all, you're a human. You have them. You have them. The danger is when we try to act like we're not, and they float around in the subconscious mind, the unconscious mind, the blind spot, and then we act from them. So that was really the first time that someone brought up to me judgment in that way.
I love that you brought me back there, because immediately my mind was like, oh gosh, I forgot about that.
Yep. And just standing up there, and I'm like, I wonder what people are writing down.
Totally. What an awesome practice.
Yeah, right. And then I loved what they did, next, because what they said next was, okay, y'all, now go in and be curious. Be curious. And that's a fun game. Curiosity is a fun game.
Yes. Curiosity killed the cat. I don't agree with that.
I don't know that I agree with that either.
I think it grew the cat.
I think it grew the cat too. I think, and cats also have many, many lives for a reason. So, like, what are we're talking about curiosity killed the cat, but then cats also have 9 lives.
True.
Right?
True. I'm over here like, wait, I think we have endless lives.
Yeah, right? Who put 9 on them?
What lifetime am I in right now?
Yeah, so this is awesome, and what I love about this is, every single one of these shows I've done, you could, like, go down 7 different rabbit holes or more and make, like, more episodes, right? We could even go down a curiosity rabbit hole.
It's kind of like the mirror, your mirror in the background.
Yes.
I love it. It's just like a web that all connects together.
Yep. So we could just go into all these different portals, we'll say,
Yes.
portals.
Yes.
So y'all, we're painting the difference between discernment versus judgment for anyone who just might have wanted help wrapping their head around that. And also just because you could line up 10 different people and have them define a word and get 10 different definitions.
Mhm.
So it's kind of nice to know like what we're all talking about here. And then, Jennifer and I talk about how why it's important to have as a tool. And I love that you shared what you got from what your clients have gotten from some of their breakthroughs. Because I can relate to all of that. So was there how was it for your client to start seeing the difference between discernment and judgment? How was that for that person?
I think she described it as like liberating, honestly. All these light bulbs started going off, and it's like everything starts to connect. Everything starts to connect because she's never experienced that depth before. She's never been guided into those parts of herself that have been covered and masked as judgments for so long. So it's like ding, 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 ding. And then you get to see a whole new side of yourself. So it's
Yes.
amazing, honestly.
And so, y'all, what Jennifer's pointing to is when we are unwilling to get out of that righteousness, um, we can't get past a certain point. And if anyone is wondering, why we do this, it boils down to we are still running the same operating system in many ways that we've gotten from our lovely ancestors. And if you imagine, um, you know, back in the day when they're hunting, when they're gathering, um, not only do they need to discern, is the fruit safe to eat? Is the berry safe to eat? Is there a lion sleeping there? But they better damn well be right about that, right? Or they die.
Totally.
And so you can see how even in that like conversation, discernment and judgment are kind of together, but they actually needed the rightness to
Mm-hmm.
feel secure and safe, and that's survival. But we're still in a lot of ways letting the survival brain run the show.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're being right and we're not being discerning, it's just a way that we have learned to feel safe in our world. So, if you meet that judgmental person, my invitation is do your best not to judge them and maybe say, wow, they're scared. They really want to feel safe.
Mm-hmm. And asking yourself, like, what am I noticing within myself being around this person?
Mm,
Because likely, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to go about this, but often I find I'm in front of people who are my teachers. Everyone around me is my teacher.
yep.
What is it that I'm noticing and observing in them that has my attention that's maybe going on inside of me as well?
Yes. Yes.
Because there's always something. And not to override the person that's sitting in front of you, but if there is that judgment or that observation coming up, you're having that thought for a reason. We have billions, and I don't know the exact number, but we have billions of
A
thoughts
lot.
throughout the day. And if one has your attention, it's likely for a reason.
Yeah, yeah, and that's exactly right. Like, and when we started off, y'all, and I was sharing, when I noticed myself really polarized thinking, really judgmental this time last year, or maybe a little bit more into the summer, why I backed up to do the inner child shadow work was I knew it was my stuff. I knew there was a reason it was coming up in me. There was some, I mean, and there was a lot of reasons to be maybe fearful last year, right? But ultimately, that doesn't help. And and I knew, right? It's not about me being right. There's something deeper going on. So going below that, and and to speak to what Jennifer had mentioned about her client, you know, I feel like for myself personally, when I came out of that, I had so much more compassion for myself and for others. And I wasn't tired anymore. Y'all, that judgment's tiring.
Hmm.
Judgment's tiring. Because it's so connected to emotion, and it's tiring emotion, not sourcing emotion.
Totally.
Tiring.
Totally. And then there's so much effort and energy put on trying to prevent others from judging you.
Right, right.
It's like you're going to be judged no matter what. It's a natural human thing to do. It's learning how to become unattached and at a space where you can observe the judgment and not be in it.
And that kind of brings me back to where we started a little bit when you were saying discernment is more about what's best for you, whereas judgment is seeing where you're at and saying, I shouldn't be here. I should be further. So when you are able to stay in a space of discernment versus judgment with yourself, how does that alter how it's going for you?
Hmm. As soon as you ask that question, it's like flow.
Mm,
It just flows. It's literally just an opportunity to be present in every moment. Um, when I'm in a state of judgment, I'm definitely still working on like catching it sooner rather than later,
yep.
but it doesn't feel good. It
No, it
doesn't
doesn't, does it?
it doesn't feel good whatsoever. So I love using like journaling or tapping, like EFT tapping, if
Yep.
you're familiar,
Yep.
or meditation or grounding down, putting my feet on the grass and allowing whatever's wanting to be released so that I can get to a place of like, okay, what's next?
Yeah, yeah. I love that, y'all, because like when we're in judgment, normally what we're gonna do too is we're gonna go find people to agree with us
Hmm.
and make it more right. But yeah, you're able to give yourself space. And what I really heard was discernment versus judgment is access to flow.
Love it.
Because y'all, when we're talking about, and you all hear me talk a lot about flow and alignment, and these are not like these airy fairy terms. Like you can start to put science behind a lot of this stuff. But a lot of it, is like we're not just aligned magically. We're not just in flow magically. For a lot of the stuff that I do and that Jennifer does as a coach, we're looking at what's access to that. What, if I'm not just like, all right, I'm in flow, very often the question I would ask is, what would give me access to flow?
Hmm.
And so what I'm hearing now is, y'all, if we are finding that we are in a space of the judgment, I have a very strong opinion. I feel very right about this. I want to go and find other people to be right with me, to make me feel
Validate
more
it.
right, more right. That is not access to flow. That is access to the binding. And what's access to saying, oh, my binds aren't even tied. I can literally let these things fall off whenever I want. That's getting more into the discernment, which again is kind of more that curiosity.
Hmm. Totally. And I often find that sometimes our survival mechanisms, which are however you want to look at survival mechanisms, our ego, our inner child, all of the above.
Arts, shadows, we can call it a lot, can't we?
Yeah. Our survival mechanisms sometimes want to have permission to be judgmental and to feel all of those things that we're feeling. And so today, even I allowed myself to be in like really deep judgment for a certain amount of time. I'm like, okay, there are some parts of me that really want to be seen in whatever's coming up. And today was anger.
Mhm.
And I let those parts of me be seen. And sometimes that looks like journaling and writing all of these horrible judgments that are coming out of my subconscious to be let out and to be freed. And to not be like judging myself as I'm expressing these things.
Judging yourself for judging.
Exactly. It's not about that. That's just going to keep you in the loop. You know, we can go back and forth trying to mask and balance and control these natural judgments that occur, but that's only going to keep them trapped in your field, trapped in your body, in your mind. That's not going to get you into that alignment and flow.
Yeah, I love that. And it reminds me of what, they did with us in our coaching leadership training, right? You have them, acknowledge them, then see how you can look past them. And I love what Jennifer said too, because if you ever find yourself, in that instance where you're like, but man, they're here, I can't ignore it. It feels inauthentic for me to just be like, I'm going to discern. Sometimes it's not accessible. If you want to be intentional about it, but not get stuck there, timers can be really great. Set a timer on it, give yourself space to fully go there. Don't try to be polished. Don't try to be transformed. Let the messy parts come out. It's okay. We all have them. And then see where you're at after you've allowed it. Because at the same time, if we stuff it down and we don't acknowledge it, that's telling those parts, hey, you're not okay. Hey, there's a problem here. You're bad. You're not good, or whatever it is, right? And we want all parts to come to the parts party if we're having one. But the way Jennifer is speaking about it and what they had us do in our training, it was intentional. It was mindful. We knew what we were doing.
Yeah, there was light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, right. There was light at the end of the tunnel.
I feel like that's important.
Yeah, it is.
What is the safe container that I have?
Yep.
It's not going to spiral into something that I don't want it to spiral into.
Yep. Or I'll even tell sometimes clients or whoever, if you are going to let yourself kind of go there for a bit and you're not sure how it's going to go, see if there's someone who can be your check-in person when you're done. Hey, I'm done. This is how it went. Or they can come looking for you.
Yeah.
If you need someone to pull you out.
Yeah. Like, rescue me if you don't hear from me in 20 minutes.
Yep.
Please.
This is good stuff.
It is. It is.
So I always like to do a check-in at this point because y'all, we schedule our time together. So we're honoring that too. But if we check in, Jennifer, because we've been in a lot of directions right now. We've just kind of flowed and shared. And I love it because the rabbit holes we went down, the circles we've opened, they've all kind of come back and met each other and they've made sense. But if we start to check in, like, is there anything where you're like, oh, we didn't touch on that, we must touch on that? Anything that feels intuitive, organic to put into the space in this moment?
I'm really curious about some of if you're open to sharing some of the practices that you like to do or that you may have done in the past to address that polarity that's within us.
That's a great question. So when I personally, this time last year, when I was really stuck in it, I actually ended up joining a group because I was like, well, if I'm around other people, that's going to be a good way to kind of start to see things. And it was actually with a healer out of the Bay Area that I had done some really, really deep work with years before. And she was doing a program called the Love Revolution. And I knew her style, and I knew it was going to be 100% experiential. She's a channel. So she channels a lot of like Mary, a lot of Kali. If anyone's like, what the heck's a channel? She's basically gotten into a space where she can just open up to receive the messages of the divine, and certain energetic sources work with her more. So we did that, and it was a space where it wasn't all the head stuff, the figuring it out, the talking. It was a lot of space to feel.
Mhm.
It was a lot of space to be. It was a lot of space to receive. It was space where we could also talk about it in the same breath. But what I had realized was I was getting in that space because I had created it once again to where I was separate and alone.
Mm.
And so I was like, I need to come back to community.
Huge.
I need to stop being separate and alone. And it really, and like the practice for me, when now with the ongoing practices, when I see the judgment and the righteousness, I first of all look for the humor. Like, okay, there's that little part again. Oh, that sneaky little thing. And I'll normally sit down and be like, sister, what are you feeling the need to be so right about right now? What are you afraid of? What is going on? And I have found for that part for me, it's very essential to meet her with humor
I love it.
and kind of laugh at her. Because normally, if you really start to put her on loudspeaker, it's like, oh my goodness, you're hysterical. You're funny.
I love that. I think I'm definitely gonna take that and borrow that because I think I like to go into like drama rather than humor, and I think that would be an awesome practice for me.
Well, and also too, that part of me, it's very serious, right? It is serious. Like, if someone else might try to laugh at it, I might be very triggered. Like, how dare you laugh at me? But, like, normally then I'm like, okay, receive the invitation, laugh at yourself.
Yeah.
But for me, it's a lot of getting out of the seriousness of it.
Cool. I love that because it brought me to how I am healing and like have overcome addiction and like just that part of me that I never wanted anyone to see. And I
Yeah,
was
right?
so afraid because I was judging it so hard. I was judging that I had this issue. I was judging that I was doing things that I wasn't proud of and having these automatic behaviors that weren't serving me whatsoever. And I didn't feel like I had the space. And it wasn't until I went to 12-step programs that
Yep.
allowed me to see how many other people are going through the same thing.
Yeah,
And
right?
through the growth and through the journey of like becoming sober and getting all that fog lifted from you, it's humorous. We can look back and laugh at those parts of us that we were so afraid of and we were judging so harshly. And
Yep.
it's ultimate freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why too, when I meet that part that way, when I mentioned I have a conversation with it, when I have a conversation with it, it takes the significance out. Because in my mind, like my first couple of conversations, even with my coach, were like, I had a story, I was evil. Like, yes, the word evil, you all, not bad, evil. Like people hear that and they're like, what? I'm like, yes, I had a story, I was evil. Because I thought, there was something wrong with me for having any mean thought at all, right? And so when I can get them on loudspeaker, they're actually kind of funny when you hear them come out. It's like, oh, damn, shit. It's a good thing. It's a good thing we're looking at that.
Right? Like, I wonder how that was running in my life.
Right? Right? And so now I can kind of laugh at it because it's so not me. But I have found you all when I speak it out loud, that's part of how I get into humor And that's how I get into non-seriousness about it. Because up here, you can't tell the tone. It feels really real. It feels really serious. It feels really shameful.
Mm-hmm.
It feels
Totally.
really shameful.
Totally. I love that. Having sounding boards.
Hmm.
And whether that's to the mirror, to the wall, or to a friend, like it's so
Yep,
important.
absolutely. I'm glad that you asked this last piece because that kind of allowed us to, give anyone who's watching this, if they might be like, I want something to practice. That gives them that.
Totally.
This was awesome. Thank you so much for doing this with me.
Thank you, Jen. I appreciate yeah, what you're sharing with the world and how you're shining light on the intimacy and the depth of coaching conversations and how it can be fun.
Yes, and y'all, and Jennifer actually captured it. There's a lot of different coaches out there. They coach in a lot of different styles. But what we're really bringing in these episodes are, more of the coaches who are trained to get off the surface, to go deeper, to dig, to assert that when we get off the surface, that's where real transformation comes from. And I'm actually having fun seeing how many different tools I can come up with that coaching is a tool for. And I'm going to go ahead and say that this is probably going to be limitless because coaching is for whatever you want it to be for.
Oh, yeah.
But, to your point, it's really showing our lovely audience what coaching really is, because I don't think that gets modeled as often as I'd like to see.
Unfortunately, no. That's why I'm grateful for the training we have and for the community that we have to continue to grow and expand and show people the importance of getting back to our natural state.
Yes. And so, y'all, that said, any coach that's ever going to be on here, we're a stand for this work. We're a stand. You're going to have ways to contact Jennifer on whatever platform you're watching this on. And, if reach out to her, follow her. If you have any questions, reach out to either of us. It's very common if you are wanting to become a coach, you might have questions. If you want to hire a coach, you might have questions. If you know anyone who wants to become a coach or hire a coach, share these interviews with them and things like that. This is going to shed some light on stuff you're not going to find like on maybe a web page or that kind of thing. So if anything comes up, just share it, and let's just really have the field of coaching be in integrity, and make sure everyone out there getting support is getting damn good support.
I love it.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, audience. And I will see you next week with another fun topic on what coaching is a tool for.
Woohoo! See you there.
And maybe my light won't be flashing the whole time. I was ready to throw it in the corner. Just turned off now. Knew I was talking stuff. All right, y'all. On that note, peace.